I sit in my chair by the window and watch the golden light of the sunset slowly dissolve into twilight. My home in Spring Creek sinks into the evening silence, the silence that has been my faithful companion since Elaine left this world. 8 years have passed, and I still turn my head out of habit when I hear a sound like her footsteps. My 68 years feel especially heavy today. Perhaps because of the change in the weather, my knees never lie about the approaching rain, or maybe because of the letter from the bank on the coffee table. Another statement reminding me of how quickly my savings are melting away. I've always been careful with money. 35 years as an insurance appraiser had taught me to see risks where others saw opportunities. Elaine sometimes joked about my meticulousness, calling me a calculator man. But it was that trait that allowed us to save enough to ensure a peaceful old age and leave something for our only daughter, Mercy. The ringing of the phone interrupts my musings. Her name pops up on the screen. "Daddy, hi." Mercy's voice sounds soft, almost gentle, only when she needs something. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine, honey. My back's a little sore, but that's normal." "You need to move more, Daddy. Why don't you join a pool? You spend too much time alone at home." I almost smile. Her concern is always practical. If I'm more active and healthy, it will save her from having to worry about me. Or, more accurately, from having to pretend to worry. "I'll think about it," I reply, knowing that the conversation will soon turn to the real reason for the call. "Dad, Langston and I are in a bit of a financial trap." Her voice gets even softer. "Remember I told you about that couple from California who wanted to buy the house on Maple Street? They backed out at the last minute, and I'd already put down a deposit to seal the deal. It's a temporary hardship, but we need to hold out until next month." I'm listening to my daughter tell another story. I've heard dozens of these temporary hardships over the years. A broken down car, a leaky roof, unexpected medical expenses, problems with Langston's business. Each time the amount gets a little higher and the promises of repayment get less and less convincing. "How much do you need this time?" I ask, interrupting her monologue. Mercy is silent for a second, clearly not expecting such directness. 2,000, she says. 2.5 at the most. We'll pay it back in a month once the deal with the Johnsons closes. I sigh. We both know they won't. Just like they didn't pay back the previous loans that turned into gifts. "Okay, I'll wire the money tomorrow." "You're the best, Daddy." Her voice instantly becomes joyful. "I'll stop by this weekend and bring you that pie you love." We both know she's not coming. The last time Mercy was at my place was 2 months ago, when she and Langston urgently needed money to fix the car wash. After the conversation, I open my notebook. There in the back pages, I keep a record of all the loans I've made to my daughter and son-in-law over the past 3 years. Amounts, dates, promises. The column of numbers grows inexorably. I used to tell myself that it was okay to help my own daughter, that it was my duty as a parent, that Elaine would do the same. But each time, those excuses sound less and less convincing. I stare at the picture on the mantel, Mercy at graduation, with a wide smile and ambition that seemed like it could change the world. When did my smart, energetic daughter turn into someone for whom I was just a source of money? The next morning, I wire the promised money and head to the store for groceries. My feet carry me along a familiar route, past the post office, the pharmacy, through the Central Park. I say hello to Mrs. Greenwood, who is walking her corgi, exchange a few words with the letter carrier, the usual routine of someone whose life has slowed to a small-town pace. As I walk out of the supermarket with a bag of shopping, my phone vibrates. A message from Mercy. "Thank you, Daddy. You really helped us out a lot. Kisses." Attached is a picture. Her and Langston smiling, raising glasses of something that looks suspiciously like champagne. Judging by the interior, they're at some expensive restaurant. I feel something inside clench. Money to pay urgent bills, and on the same day, a celebration at a restaurant? However, I am no longer surprised by such things. In the evening, I get a call from Hutch Merriweather, my old friend and probably the only person other than my daughter with whom I keep in regular communication. "Truman, you old grouch." His booming voice always sounds like he's addressing a jury. "How about a game of chess tomorrow? I bought a new kind of coffee you're sure to like." Hutch is a lawyer who never stops working, even in his seventh decade. We met 20 years ago when he was representing a client whose house had been damaged in a flood and I was assessing the damage. Our friendship had only grown stronger since then, especially after Elaine's death. "I'll be there at 2 o'clock, I replied. "And this time, don't try to cheat by moving the pieces while I turn my back." Hutch laughs and hangs up. The next day, I sit on the veranda of Hutch's house. Old wooden chess pieces are spread out between us, cups of coffee steaming nearby. I absent-mindedly make a move, my thoughts still returning to Mercy's picture from yesterday. "You're out of shape today," Hutch remarks, picking up my elephant. "You don't usually make such obvious mistakes." I sigh and tell him about the last loan and the picture from the restaurant. Hutch frowns. "How much do they owe you now?" "I stopped counting," I answer, though it's not true. "I know the exact amount, $27,600 over the last 3 years. It's not about the money, Hutch. It's that they don't see me as anything but an ATM machine. I told you that a year ago." Hutch never hesitated to be blunt. "You're too nice to them, Truman. They're taking advantage of it." "She's my daughter," I answer, though the words sound less and less convincing. "A daughter who only sees you as a source of funding." Hutch takes a sip of coffee. "When was the last time they took you out to dinner? Or just stopped by for a visit without asking for money?" I don't answer because we both know the answer. "They're using you, my friend," Hutch continues, "and they'll keep using you as long as you let them." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you deny your own daughter help. I'm suggesting you stop calling it help. It's not helping, it's exploiting your kindness. Help is when you support someone in a difficult situation. And judging by the pictures from the expensive restaurants, they're not in a difficult situation." I don't say anything, but Hutch's words keep echoing in my head. The week goes by with the usual worries. I work in the garden, read, sometimes watch old movies we used to love with Elaine. Thoughts of my daughter and our strange relationship never leave me. On Friday, I get a text from Mercy. "Dad, can we come over this weekend and see you? It's been a while." I reply in agreement, even though I know that long time no see means they need something again. Saturday afternoon, I hear the sound of a car pulling up. Through the window, I see Langston's shiny black SUV, a newer model bought just recently. I think about how much of my borrowing went into its purchase. Mercy enters with a wide smile and a bouquet of flowers. Langston follows her, holding a bottle of wine. "Daddy!" Mercy throws her arms around me. She smells like expensive perfume. "Oh, how we missed you." I hug her back, trying to remember the last time she called me Daddy, other than when asking for money. "Truman." Langston shakes my hand. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. "You're looking good. Still working in the garden?" We walk through to the living room. Mercy is bustling in the kitchen, warming up the dinner she brought. Langston opens the wine, talking about his business, about how well it's going, about the prospects. I listen and think, if things are going so well, why do they keep asking me for money? Over dinner, the conversation inevitably turns to the true purpose of their visit. "Dad," Mercy begins, taking a sip of wine, "we've been thinking. Your house is so big for one person. Have you ever thought about moving to something smaller? Maybe those new retirement apartments on Riverside? It's got a doctor, a pool, lots of people your age. Oh, that's it. A house." Of course they want my house. 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood, mortgage paid off. It's a great asset to sell. "I'm comfortable here," I answer calmly. "All my memories are tied to this place." "But Dad," Mercy doesn't back down, You can't live on memories. You have to think about the future, about your comfort. With a house this big, there's so much to take care of. Cleaning, renovating, gardening. I manage, I say. And I like gardening. You know, Langston intervenes. Real estate prices are at their peak. If you sold the house, not only could you buy a nice apartment, but you'd have a good amount of money left over. I look at both of them and suddenly it's very clear. They don't just want my money, they want everything. My house, my savings. They want me to move into the retirement apartments, give them the proceeds of the sale, and then live out my days without causing them any problems. I'm not selling the house, I say firmly. This is my house, and I'm staying here until the end. Mercy's smile becomes strained. Dad, we're just taking care of you. It's not like you're getting any younger, and a big house takes a lot of energy. Thanks for your concern, I reply, but I already said I'm staying here. Dinner continues in a tense atmosphere. Mercy quickly changes the subject to small talk, but I can tell she's upset. Langston drinks more than usual. Before leaving, Mercy hugs me again, this time not as sincerely. Think about our offer, Daddy, she says. We only want what's best for you. I nod, but a certainty grows inside me. The only thing they want is my money. After they leave, I sit in silence, looking at Elaine's picture. What would she say, seeing what our daughter has become? Elaine has always been straightforward and had no tolerance for manipulation. She certainly wouldn't approve of Mercy's behavior. You're being too soft on her, Truman. I feel as if I can hear my wife's voice. I always have been. But sometimes you have to be firm. I decide to take that imaginary advice. It's time to stop being an ATM for my own daughter and her husband. It's time to reclaim my dignity. The next day I call Hutch and tell him about the visit. They want you to sell the house, Hutch snorts. Why am I not surprised? What should I do, Hutch? I ask. I don't want to lose my daughter, but I can't keep living like this. You need to set boundaries, Truman, he says seriously. Clear financial boundaries. No more loans. No more talk of selling the house. If Mercy truly loves you as a father and not as an ATM, she'll accept it. If not, well, better to find out the truth now than when there's nothing left of your savings. Tuesday began as usual. I got up at 7 o'clock sharp, made coffee, and sat by the window with a cup and a fresh newspaper. Since Elaine's death, morning rituals had become my anchor, keeping me from drifting into the abyss of loneliness. The methodicality and predictability brought a strange comfort. A phone call broke the morning silence. Mercy. This early is unusual. Dad! Her voice sounded unnaturally excited. We have exciting news. Good morning, Mercy. I took a sip of coffee. What's up? Langston got a promotion, she exclaimed. He's now the regional director of the entire car wash chain in Spring Creek and 2 neighboring towns. Can you believe it? Congratulations, I said, trying to sound sincere. Tell him congratulations. He's right there to tell you. There was a fumble with the phone and my son-in-law's voice filled the line. Truman! Langston always addressed me by my first name, never called me Dad, or at least father-in-law. Big career change. I'm now on the executive team of the company. Good for you, Langston. I hope your salary has increased accordingly? Oh yes, he laughed, sounding fake. But you know, new job, new expenses, representation, business lunches, of course. Even in the moment of joy, there's a hint of financial hardship. It's as if the promotion isn't a reason to reduce my borrowing, but a new reason to ask for more. My co-workers and I are celebrating tonight at Le Bistro, Langston continued. You know that place? It's a new French restaurant downtown. I've heard of it, I replied. They say it's expensive. Yeah, it's not cheap, he sounded smug. But the bosses insisted. Corporate account, you know. I could hear Mercy saying something in the background. By the way, Truman, Langston continued after a pause, Mercy and I have decided to have a family dinner Friday night, also at Le Bistro. It'll be an excuse to wear your dress suit. I mentally sighed. I don't have a suit. I have an old navy blue one that I wear to rare formal events. The last time was for a friend's funeral 6 months ago. I'd love to, I said. What time? 7 o'clock. I've already made a reservation. He sounded a little bossy. But, there's a dress code. Maybe you need a closet change. Mercy picked up the phone again. Dad, don't listen to him. Your suit is fine, she paused. Although, to be honest, it's a little outdated. Why don't you get a new one? It's a special night. I felt the irritation rising inside. My suit is a lovely suit I bought 5 years ago for our friend's wedding anniversary, but I never looked presentable enough for them. Okay, I'll think about it, I replied neutrally. Great. Mercy's voice became cheerful again. See you Friday then, Daddy. Kisses. She hung up without waiting for my reply. I put the phone away and stared out the window. I had a strange feeling. On the one hand, it was nice to be invited to celebrate Langston's promotion. On the other, something about the invitation felt insincere. They'd never invited me to a restaurant before. We usually met at my house, where Mercy could go through things looking for things to pick up, and Langston could discreetly remind me of his financial difficulties. Why did they need to take me to an expensive restaurant? The answer came almost immediately. They were going to ask for money, more than usual, and they're counting on the fact that, in a public place in a festive atmosphere, it will be harder for me to refuse. After breakfast, I decided I really needed a new suit, not because the old one was bad, but because I wanted to look dignified when I denied them another financial aid. Yes, I decided I would no longer be their ATM. The conversation with Hutch was firmly rooted in my mind. It was time to set boundaries. Around noon, I headed downtown. Spring Creek is a small town, but with a claim to sophistication. There were a few decent clothing stores on the main street, and I went to the one where I'd bought my last suit. The day was warm and sunny. I walked at a leisurely pace, enjoying the weather and watching the life of the city. As I passed Le Bistro, I slowed down. The restaurant was housed in an old building with large windows and an elegant sign. Through the glass, I could see white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers. A really expensive place. I was greeted in the store by a young salesman who was overly gracious but not intrusive. He helped me choose a dark gray suit with a modern cut but conservative style. The suit fits perfectly, the salesman remarked when I tried it on. It looks great on you. Thank you, I said, looking at myself in the mirror. Indeed, the suit fit well and looked elegant. May I ask what kind of event you are buying it for? The salesman asked as he helped me take off my jacket. A family dinner, I replied, at Le Bistro. Oh, that's a great place, he smiled. I went there last week with my girlfriend. Expensive, but the food is excellent. I nodded and started to change back into my clothes. You need a new shirt to go with your suit, the salesman continued. We just got a new collection in. He showed me a few options and I chose a classic white one. When it came to a tie, I decided on a navy blue one with a small geometric pattern, conservative but tasteful. As I left the store with my purchases, I felt a strange satisfaction. The new suit was not cheap $380, not counting the shirt and tie, but I could afford it. Unlike Mercy and Langston, I don't live beyond my means. Walking back past Le Bistro, I noticed a familiar figure coming out of the restaurant. Hutch Merriweather, an old friend of mine, a lawyer. He was talking to a man in an expensive suit, apparently a client or colleague. They shook hands and the stranger left. Truman, Hutch exclaimed when he saw me. What an unexpected meeting. We shook hands. Hutch looked as elegant as ever in his dark suit. Despite his age, he remained trim and energetic. Business lunch? I asked, nodding at the restaurant. Yes, with a client. He looked at my shopping bag. Updating your closet? I bought a new suit. Mercy and Langston invited me to dinner Friday night, right here at Le Bistro. We're celebrating Langston's promotion. Hutch raised his eyebrows in surprise. Promotion? Interesting. I hear his company's downsizing. Really? Now I was surprised. He said he'd become regional director. Hutch shrugged. Maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe he was promoted in the midst of layoffs. It happens. We walked away from the restaurant and slowly down the street. Speaking of Le Bistro, Hutch continued casually, I saw your daughter and her husband there last week, and I think the week before that too. They were in the company of some people laughing loudly, drinking champagne. I stopped. Are you sure? Absolutely, Hutch stopped too. I often have lunch there with clients. Good food, convenient location. Your daughter and her husband seem to have become regulars there too. I was silent, digesting the information. Mercy and Langston are regulars at one of the most expensive restaurants in town. The same Mercy and Langston who beg me for money to pay bills and emergencies. Did they tell you they frequent that place? Hutch asked, watching my reaction carefully. No, I replied. On the contrary, Langston had just told me on the phone that it was an expensive place and they were only going there today because the company was paying for it. Hutch hummed. Well, yes, of course. The company pays for their weekly champagne dinners. We slowly continued on our way. I could feel the anger building up inside. Not because they go to expensive restaurants, that's their right. It's because of the lies. Because they ask me for money for necessities and they spend it on luxuries. You know, Truman, Hutch put his hand on my shoulder, I've been meaning to tell you for a long time. Your daughter and her husband take advantage of your kindness. They only see you as a source of money. I know, I answered quietly. I'm beginning to realize that. What are you going to do? I looked at the bag with the new suit in my hand. Go to that dinner. I'm going to hear what they want. And then I'm going to tell them I'm not going to be their ATM anymore. Hutch nodded approvingly. It's about time. Just be prepared for the fact that they won't take it quietly. People who are used to parasitizing others rarely give up their habits easily. We reached a crossroads where our paths diverged. Keep me posted on how dinner goes, Hutch said in parting. And remember, you don't have to support adults who can work and earn their own money. I nodded and headed home, thinking about the conversation. The information that Mercy and Langston were regulars at Le Bistro kept me on my toes. It explained where my loans were going. Not to pay bills, not to repair a leaky roof, not to cure non-existent illnesses, but for champagne and lobster at an expensive restaurant. At home, I hung my new suit in the closet and sat by the window with a notebook. I started writing everything I wanted to say to my daughter and son-in-law. About how I can't and won't be their ATM anymore. About how their lies and manipulations hurt me. About how I want a normal family relationship based on love and respect, not financial dependence. What was written seemed like an accusatory speech. I reread it and tore up the sheet. No, it wasn't. I don't want a scandal. I want calm and firm boundaries. No emotion, no accusations, just the facts. The next few days passed in anticipation of Friday. I mentally rehearsed several times the conversation I was going to have with Mercy and Langston. The more I thought about their behavior, the firmer my resolve to end this financial addiction became. Thursday night, I received a text from Mercy. Don't forget about dinner tomorrow night, Daddy. We're expecting you at 7 at Le Bistro. Wear something dressy. Kisses. I replied with a short, I will, not giving in to her affectionate tone. She only used the word daddy when she wanted something. Friday morning, I woke up with a sense of determination. Today, everything would change. Today, I would stop being an ATM for my own daughter and her husband. I spent the day doing my usual chores, trying not to think about the upcoming conversation. After lunch, I showered, shaved, and started getting dressed. The new suit fit perfectly. Looking in the mirror, I saw not the hunched elderly man I often felt around my daughter and son-in-law, but a confident man. Yes, I am 68. Yes, I am a widower. But I am not a helpless old man to be manipulated. At 7:30, I left the house and got into the car. The evening was warm and clear. On the way to the restaurant, I thought about how my relationship with my daughter had changed since Elaine's death. My wife had always been strong and straightforward. She wouldn't let Mercy manipulate us. "You're too soft on her, Truman," she often said. "Sometimes you have to be firm." At exactly 7 o'clock that evening, I parked the car near Le Bistro. Although it was warm outside, I felt a strange chill inside, a premonition that tonight would change my relationship with my daughter. I put on the new suit I'd bought especially for the occasion, and looking at my reflection in the rearview mirror, I thought I looked decent. At least Mercy wouldn't be able to say I was an unkempt old man. The restaurant greeted me with dimmed lights and soft, classical music. The maitre d', an elegant man in his 40s, inquired with a slight French accent about my reservation. "Whitlock, 7 o'clock, I replied. He checked his clipboard and nodded. "Yes, a table for 3. Your companions haven't arrived yet. Would you like to wait for them at a table or at the bar?" "Table, please." He showed me to a table by the window. It was a nice place, overlooking the city's central square, where the evening lights were already on. I sat down, ordered a sparkling water, and waited. At 7 hours and 20 minutes, Mercy and Langston were still gone. I started checking my phone. No missed calls or messages. Nothing. Tardiness was normal for them, but this time I was strangely anxious. At 7 hours and 30 minutes, my phone finally rang. Mercy's name popped up on the screen. "Dad, hi." Her voice sounded muffled, like she was speaking from under a blanket. "I have a terrible migraine. I can't get out of bed. Langston stayed home to take care of me, too. We're going to have to cancel dinner. I'm sorry." I felt a prick of disappointment, though I wasn't surprised. It was typical of Mercy to cancel plans at the last minute, especially when they didn't promise her financial gain. "I'm sorry you're not feeling well," I said. "Did you take your medicine?" "Yes, but it's not working. I'm lying in the dark right now. It's hard for me to even talk." For someone who has a hard time talking, she sounded quite cheerful. "I understand. Get well. We can reschedule for another time." "Thanks for understanding, Dad. I'll call you when I feel better." We said goodbye, and I put the phone away. Something about that conversation felt fake. A sudden migraine? On the day we were supposed to meet at an expensive restaurant? Too convenient. I called for the waiter. "I'm sorry, my companions won't be able to make it. I'd better be going." "I'm sorry, sir," he replied with polite sympathy. "May I suggest you dine alone? We've got some excellent veal with truffle sauce tonight." I wondered. Should I leave now? Or... Hutch's words echoed in my head. He'd seen Mercy and Langston here more than once. What if they just didn't want to meet me? What if they're at another restaurant right now, spending the money they asked me for under the pretense of emergencies? "You know, I think I'm going to stay," I said to the waiter, "and I'd like to order a glass of red wine. What would you recommend?" "Excellent choice, sir. I can suggest a Merlot from the 2000s, an excellent vintage." I nodded, though I didn't know much about wine. Elaine and I rarely afforded ourselves such luxuries. When the waiter left, I began to look over the menu. The prices were impressive. The average main course cost about $40, not counting appetizers, drinks, and desserts. No wonder Mercy and Langston were in constant need of loans if they frequented places like this on a regular basis. I placed my order and sat sipping my wine and watching the other customers. The restaurant was slowly filling up. Elegant couples, groups of business people, a few families with grown-up children, all well-dressed, confident. I felt a little out of place, but my new suit added confidence. It had been about 40 minutes. I was already finishing my main course when I noticed them. Through the restaurant's large window, I saw Langston's familiar black SUV pull into the parking lot. My heart raced. Had they really decided to come despite Mercy's migraine? I watched them get out of the car. Mercy looked gorgeous in a tight black dress. No sign of a migraine. Langston, as always, was in an expensive suit. They talked animatedly about something, laughing. Then they held hands and walked toward the entrance to the restaurant. I felt a wave of anger rising in me. They had lied to me, canceled our meeting under false pretenses, and now they showed up here thinking I wasn't here. Mercy and Langston entered the restaurant without noticing me. I was sitting in the corner, partially hidden by a column. The maitre d' greeted them like regulars, with a smile of recognition and a slight bow. They didn't give their last name, didn't mention a reservation. He simply led them to a table at the other end of the room. I watched them sit down. Langston said something, and Mercy laughed, tilting her head. They looked carefree, happy, enjoying life. A life I was partially paying for. My waiter came over to ask if I wanted dessert. "No, thank you," I replied, not taking my eyes off my daughter and son-in-law. "But I'd like to move to another table." "Of course, sir. Which one?" "That one over there." I pointed to a vacant table near Mercy and Langston. "And bring me the bill, please." The waiter nodded, a little surprised, but asked no questions. He helped me over to another table, unnoticed by Mercy and Langston, who were too engrossed in each other and the menu. Sitting at the new table, I could hear their conversation. "What are you ordering, dear?" Langston asked. "How about the lobster? It makes sense to celebrate tonight." "Celebrate what?" Mercy asked with a slight chuckle. "That we got rid of a boring dinner with Dad." "That too," Langston lowered his voice, but I could still hear it. "But what I meant was that the Harrisons had agreed to the deal. The commission will be impressive." "Oh, that's definitely worth noting," Mercy exclaimed. "Then I'll have the lobster and a bottle of that champagne we had last time." The waiter brought me the bill and I paid, leaving a generous tip. Then I sat and waited, watching Mercy and Langston place their order. They were so engrossed in themselves that they didn't even notice me, even though I was sitting only a few feet away. When the waiter moved away from their table, I decided the moment had come. I stood up and leisurely made my way towards them. They still didn't notice me until I stopped right in front of their table. "Good evening," I said quietly. They looked up, their faces frozen in an expression of shock. Mercy went pale and Langston swallowed nervously. "Dad!" Mercy exclaimed after a second's silence. How did you—" "I decided to have dinner here, despite the cancellation of our meeting," I replied, continuing to remain calm. "I'm glad to see that your migraine went away so quickly." Langston tried to salvage the situation. "Truman, what a coincidence. Mercy really wasn't feeling well, but then she suddenly felt better, and we decided to—" "Please," I interrupted him, raising my hand. "Let's not lie, at least for tonight." I sat down at their table uninvited. They exchanged confused looks. "We were really going to call you," Mercy began, her voice sounding unconvincing even to herself, "as soon as we realized I was feeling better. But it was getting late, and we thought—" "Hutch Merriweather has seen you here more than once," I said, interrupting her again. "Over the last few weeks, the same weeks that you've been asking me for money for bills and emergencies. They were as silent as school children caught cheating." "I'm not going to make a scene," I continued. "I just want to understand. Why did you have to lie? Why couldn't you just say you wanted to have dinner alone?" Mercy started to make excuses. "Dad, we didn't mean to hurt you. It's just, we had plans of our own, and you can be, a little old-fashioned sometimes." "Old-fashioned," I said again. "You mean I wouldn't approve of the way you spend the money I give you?" "Truman," Langston interjected, "I think you've misunderstood the situation. Yes, we've had financial difficulties and you've been very helpful. We're grateful. But today we have cause for celebration, Mercy's big deal. We deserve a little vacation." "A little vacation," I nodded, "at a restaurant where dinner for two costs over $200, while you tell me you're barely making ends meet." Mercy was starting to lose her patience. "Dad, why the interrogation? Yes, we occasionally allow ourselves a dinner at a nice restaurant. Is that a crime? We work hard. We deserve to be rewarded. Of course you do, I agreed. No one's arguing. The only question is whose money you're rewarding yourself with. There was an awkward pause. The waiter approached with a bottle of champagne, but sensing the tension at the table, hesitantly stopped. "Shall I open it?" he asked. Langston nodded, clearly wanting to lighten the mood. "Yes, please, and bring another glass for my father-in-law." The waiter opened the bottle and filled 3 glasses. When he left, Langston raised his own glass. "To family," he said with a strained smile. Mercy raised her glass without looking at me. I left mine untouched. "Over the past 3 years," I said, looking at them both, "I have loaned you a total of $27,600, money that you have never paid back and, I assume, have no intention of paying back." They were silent. Mercy lowered her eyes and Langston began to twist the glass in his hands. "I don't mind helping my daughter," I continued, "but I don't mind being used and lied to. You said you needed the money for bills, for repairs, for medical expenses, but you spent it on restaurants, expensive things, and entertainment." "Not all the money went to entertainment," Langston tried to argue. "We did have bills to pay, repairs to make." "Maybe," I agreed. "But the fact remains that you're living beyond your means. And instead of cutting back, you've decided to use me as an additional source of income." "Dad, that's not fair." Mercy finally looked at me. Tears glistened in her eyes, but I didn't believe they were sincere. "We've never considered you a source of income. You're our family. We love you. Love you so much that you lied about a migraine to avoid having dinner with me," I remarked, "and then came to the same restaurant without me." They didn't have an answer. "Look," I said after a pause, softer, "I'm not going to make a scene or lecture you. I just want you to know that I'm not going to give you any more money." Their faces changed. Mercy looked like I'd punched her, and Langston clenched his jaw. "What do you mean you won't give me any more money?" Mercy asked in a trembling voice. "Exactly what I said. No more loans. No more financial assistance. You're adults with good incomes. It's time you learn to live within your means." "But Dad," Mercy objected, "you know that sometimes emergencies arise. What if we really need help? Then you'll have to solve problems like every other adult does. Cut back on expenses, take out loans from the bank, look for additional sources of income." Langston looked worried. "Truman, I think you're being too hasty in your decision. Yes, we may not have been completely honest about tonight, but that's no reason to cut family ties." "I'm not cutting family ties," I replied. "I'm just not being your ATM anymore. We can still see each other, socialize, spend time together. If, of course, you still want to when you realize you're not getting any more money from me." Mercy started to cry. Real tears or play acting, I couldn't tell anymore. "How can you say that? You think we've only been talking to you for money? Didn't we?" I asked you bluntly. "When was the last time you came to me just like that without asking for financial help? When you called to see how I was feeling, not to tell me another story about temporary difficulties?" They were silent because we all knew the answer. "I have another surprise for you," I said after a pause. "I have changed my will. My entire house and all my savings will be given to a charity for the elderly without family support after my death. That's something they didn't expect." Mercy stopped crying and stared at me with wide-open eyes. Langston turned pale. You can't do this," Mercy whispered. "We're your family, your only heirs." "I can and I did," I replied calmly. "I met with Hutch last week and we finalized all the necessary paperwork. The will is now in effect." "You disinherited us?" Langston couldn't hide his indignation. "Over one dinner?" "Not because of one dinner," I shook my head. "Because of 3 years of lies and manipulation. Because you saw me as a source of money, not a family member. Because you cared more about what was in my wallet than what was in my heart." Mercy wasn't crying anymore. Her face had become hard, almost angry. "You've always been like this," she said bitterly. Always counting every dime, always afraid to spend too much. Even when Mom was alive, you controlled every expense. Now you want to punish us for wanting to live a normal life. A normal life? I questioned. Cheating on my father, begging him for money for bills, and then spending it on restaurants and entertainment is a normal life. If so, then maybe I really don't belong in this new world anymore. I got up from the table. I had said all I wanted to say. You may continue with your dinner. And don't worry, I've already paid the bill for my place. I turned to leave, but Langston grabbed my arm. You can't just leave, he said in a low voice. We haven't finished this conversation. I am, I replied, releasing my hand, and you're going to have to live with that. I headed for the exit, feeling the stares of the other customers who had no doubt noticed our tense conversation, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. From manipulation, from guilt, from the burden of being an ATM for my own daughter. Stepping outside, I took a deep breath of the evening air. Somewhere in the back of my mind was pain. The pain of realizing that my daughter, my only child, saw me only as a source of money. But along with that pain came relief. I finally stood up for myself, set boundaries I should have set long ago. I got in my car and looked at my reflection in the mirror. A tired 68-year-old man looked back at me, but there was something new in his eyes: determination, dignity, self-respect. You'd be proud of me, Elaine, I whispered, thinking of my wife. I finally did what you always advised. I stood firm. I started the engine and drove home, leaving Mercy and Langston to deal with the consequences of their lies. I knew this wasn't the end of the story. They wouldn't accept the loss of their ATM and inheritance so easily. But today, I had taken the first step toward a new life, a life in which I would no longer allow myself to be used. I woke up earlier than usual, long before dawn. Sleep didn't bring rest. All night I was haunted by the fragments of last night's conversation, by the shocked faces of Mercy and Langston, by the realization that I had finally broken the cycle of financial dependency. The feeling was strange, a mixture of relief, bitterness, and anxiety about what would happen next. Going down to the kitchen, I brewed a stronger coffee than usual and sat by the window, watching the first rays of sunlight color the sky pink. The phone was silent. No calls, no messages from Mercy. I didn't know whether to be happy about that or worried. Perhaps she was too shocked or angry to contact me. Or more likely, she and Langston were strategizing how to get me back into the family ATM position. Around 10 o'clock, I went out into the garden. Working outdoors always helped me clear my head. I busied myself pruning the roses Elaine had planted the year before she died. They always reminded me of her, just as beautiful and strong, but needing care and attention. The sound of a car pulling up pulled me out of my reverie. I straightened up and saw Langston's black SUV pulling up in front of my house. Mercy jumped out of the passenger seat without waiting for her husband to turn off the engine. Her face was tense, determined. I sighed. It was starting. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, walking quickly toward me across the lawn. "We need to talk." I nodded, took off my gardening gloves, and put the pruning shears on the bench. "Good morning, Mercy. Langston," I added as my son-in-law joined us. "Truman," he nodded briefly. His usually confident face looked strained. "Let's go inside," I suggested. I was just about to make tea. They followed me into the kitchen, where I put on the kettle and took out the cups. No one said a word as I made the tea. I could feel their eyes on my back, impatient, accusing. "So," I said, turning to them with the teapot in my hand, "what did you want to talk about?" Mercy took a deep breath, clearly holding back her emotions. "Dad, we need to discuss what happened yesterday. You made some very serious decisions under the influence of emotion, and I think that today, when everyone has calmed down, we can look at the situation more rationally." "I'm absolutely calm," I replied, pouring the tea. "And I was calm yesterday. My decisions weren't emotional, Mercy. They were deliberate and measured. But to disinherit your own daughter, her voice trembled, over one misunderstanding, that's cruel, Papa. It wasn't a misunderstanding. I sat down across from them. You lied to me about a migraine to cancel our meeting, and then you went to the same restaurant without me. It was a conscious deception. All right, Langston interjected in a conciliatory tone. We admit we did wrong. It was a stupid lie and we're sorry. But, Truman, that's no reason to break up the family relationship and change the will. I sipped my tea, looking at them carefully. They looked genuinely concerned, but I couldn't help thinking that it wasn't the breakup of the relationship that was bothering them, but the loss of financial support. This isn't just about last night, I said calmly. It's about years of manipulation and lies. The fact that you saw me only as a source of money. That's not true, Mercy cried out, tears welling up in her eyes. We love you, Dad. You're my family, my only parent. How can you think that only your money matters to me? Because everything proves exactly that, I replied. You only come to me when you need money. You call to tell another story of financial hardship. When was the last time you were interested in my life, my health, my interests? Mercy looked like I hit her. That's not fair. We care about you. Yes, we may not always show it the way you'd like, but that doesn't mean we don't love you. Besides, Langston added, there's such a thing as parenthood. You're Mercy's father. Isn't it natural for parents to help their children? It's natural to help, I agreed, but it's not natural to be used. I've been helping you for years, giving away a significant portion of my savings. And you continued to live beyond your means, spending money on restaurants and luxuries while telling me stories about how you could barely make ends meet. Mercy changed tactics. Dad, she began more gently, taking my hand, I understand why you're upset. We really haven't always been honest about how we spend our money. It was a mistake and we apologize. But please think about what you're doing. Do you really want everything you and Mom have built over the years to go to some strangers instead of your own daughter? These strangers are elderly people left without family support, I replied. People who find themselves in a situation similar to mine. I think it's a worthy use for my money. But it's our inheritance. Langston couldn't stand it. We were counting on these funds. Here it is, the truth at last. They were counting on my money, planning their future based on what they would get when I died. Exactly, Langston, I said quietly. You were counting. You were waiting for me to die so you could get the house and the savings. Perhaps even hasten the moment with your constant demands for money, which drained my resources and my health. How can you say such a thing? Mercy exclaimed, pulling her hand away. Are you accusing us of wishing for your death? It's monstrous. I'm not accusing anyone, I replied. I'm just stating a fact. You planned your future based on my money. And now you're upset not because you're afraid of losing your relationship with me, but because you're afraid of losing access to my finances. Langston stood up, his face flushed with anger. I'm not going to sit here and listen to these insults, he said sharply. You're out of your mind, old man. Your paranoia and avarice are destroying the family. I looked at him calmly. You see, Langston, that's exactly the kind of reaction that proves me right. Instead of trying to understand my feelings, you jump straight to insults. Old man, crazy, paranoid is the language of a man who only sees me as an obstacle to getting money. Mercy tugged her husband's sleeve, urging him to sit down. Langston, please, we're not going to get anywhere this way. He reluctantly lowered himself into the chair, still seething with anger. Mercy turned to me again, her eyes full of tears. Daddy, please, we're family, the only family you have left. Do you really want to cut all ties with us? I'm not cutting ties, I replied. I'm simply ceasing to be your ATM. We can still communicate, spend time together, if, of course, you want to without financial gain. Of course we do, Mercy exclaimed. You're my father. I love you. Then prove it, I said. Come to me without asking for money. Take an interest in my life. Spend time with me not because you need something, but because you really want to be there for me." She was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. "As for my decision about the will," I continued, "it's final. My house and my savings will be given to a charitable foundation upon my death. If you want to repair our relationship, you'll have to accept that." Langston shook his head. "You're making a huge mistake, Truman. And when you realize it, it may be too late. We can just, out of your life. Forever." "That's your right," I answered, though something inside me clenched at his words. "But that would only confirm that you only cared about my money, not me." Mercy looked at me with a mixture of anger and despair. "This is blackmail, Dad. You're putting us in the position of either accepting your terms or losing you." "No, Mercy. You're the one who's been blackmailing me for years with your love that depended on my financial generosity. Now I'm just ending that game." They sat in silence, digesting my words. Finally, Langston stood up. "Let's go, Mercy. There's nothing for us to do here. Your father's made up his mind." Mercy hesitated, looking at me with a pleading look in her eyes. "Dad, please, think about it again." "I have," I said firmly, "and my decision won't change." She stood up, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "You're going to regret this," she said quietly. "When you're alone, with no family, no support, you'll remember this conversation and you'll regret it." "Maybe," I agreed. "But it's better to be alone than to be used by the ones you love." They left without another word. I heard the car doors slam, the engine roar, the tires screech on the gravel. And then there was silence, a deep, all-consuming silence that seemed to fill the whole house. I sat motionless, staring at the unfinished tea in Mercy and Langston's cups. What did I feel? Relief? Sadness? Regret? Probably all at once. I had just severed a relationship with my only daughter, possibly forever. And even though my mind told me I had done the right thing, my heart still ached. A phone call brought me out of my daze. "Hutch." "Truman? How are you?" "I've been better," I answered honestly. "I'm calling to see how dinner went last night. Did you talk to them?" "Yes, I did, and not just last night. They were just here." I told him everything. About how I'd caught Mercy and Langston in the restaurant. About the conversation at the table. About how I'd announced to them my decision about financial support and the will. About today's visit and their attempts to manipulate me. "They threatened to break off the relationship completely," I finished. "Langston said they could walk out of my life forever." "How do you feel about that?" Hutch asked cautiously. "I don't know," I sighed. "On the one hand, it pains me to think that I may never see my daughter again. On the other, if the only reason she's been in a relationship with me is for money, then maybe it's better to break it off." "I think you did the right thing," Hutch said after a pause. "Hard, painful, but the right thing. They used you, Truman, and they would have kept using you if you hadn't put a stop to it." "I know," I agreed. "But that doesn't make it any easier." "Of course it doesn't. She's your daughter no matter what. But sometimes you have to be tough, even if it hurts. You know what? I'll come by your place after work. We could have dinner, play chess. You shouldn't be alone right now." "Thank you, Hutch." I was touched by his concern. "I'll be waiting." After the conversation, I went out into the garden and sat on a bench among Elaine's roses. The sun was shining brightly, and a light breeze rustled the leaves. Life went on despite the storm of emotions inside me. I thought about Mercy, about what she was like as a child, inquisitive, energetic, full of life. When and how had she turned into someone for whom material possessions became more important than family ties? Could it be that Elaine and I missed something in her upbringing? Or was it Langston's influence, his constant pursuit of status and wealth? Hutch arrived in the evening with a bottle of good whiskey and a ready meal from the restaurant. "Decided you didn't have time to cook tonight," he said, arranging the containers on the kitchen table. We ate dinner, talking about various things, politics, sports, books we'd recently read. Hutch deliberately avoided the subject of Mercy and Langston, and I was grateful to him for that. After dinner, we sat down at the chessboard. The game always helped me concentrate, take my mind off troubling thoughts. "You know, Truman," said Hutch, making a queen move, "I admire what you've done. Not everyone would have the strength to stand up to the manipulation of their own children." "I'm just tired of being an ATM," I replied, pondering my move. "Tired of the lies and insincerity." "And rightly so, but don't think they'll give up so easily. People who are used to getting what they want rarely give up after the first rejection." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Mercy and Langston might try to contest your new will, or find other ways to get their hands on your money." I looked at him with concern. "They could contest the will?" "Theoretically, yes. They could try to prove that you were incapacitated when you signed it, or that you were pressured. But don't worry," he added, seeing the look on my face. "I drew up the documents perfectly, and there are witnesses who can attest to your sanity and the voluntariness of your decision." I nodded, a little relieved. "Thank you, Hutch, for everything." "You're welcome, old sport. That's what friends are for." We went on with the game, but I couldn't help thinking about what Mercy and Langston might do. What would they do next? Would they accept my decision? Or, as Hutch had suggested, try to find a way around it? By the end of the evening, I was feeling better. Hutch's presence, encouragement, and common sense had a calming effect. I knew there were more challenges ahead, but I also knew I had done the right thing. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my life, no longer hostage to the manipulations of my daughter and son-in-law. "Keep me posted if anything happens," Hutch said as he said goodbye at the door. "And remember, you're not alone in this situation." I nodded, grateful for his support. When he left, I sat in the quiet of the living room for a long time, staring at Elaine's picture on the mantel. I wanted to believe that she would approve of my actions, that she would be on my side in this conflict. But most of all, I wished she were here, close by, so I could talk to her, hear her advice, feel her support. "I made the right choice, Elaine," I whispered. "You did, didn't you?" It had been a week since our last conversation with Mercy and Langston, a week of absolute silence. No calls, no texts, no visits. It was like they'd cut me out of their lives as soon as they realized they weren't getting any more money from me. The thought hurt, but it also confirmed that I had made the right decision. I stood at the living room window, looking out at the garden where Elaine's roses were beginning to fade as fall approached. A strange feeling of emptiness and freedom filled me at the same time. I had lost my daughter, or rather, I realized that I had lost her long ago, when she had decided to see me only as a source of finance. But at the same time, I had found myself, my dignity, my right to manage my life without manipulation or guilt. A phone call interrupted my musings. "Hutch, how you holding up, old man?" he asked without preamble. "All right," I answered. "Quiet. No word from Mercy." I thought so. I could hear the sympathy in his voice. "Look, I'm calling on business. Remember when you said you wanted to keep yourself busy, find a new hobby?" I remember I mentioned during our last meeting that I was feeling a little lost without Mercy's constant calls and demands. "Our college is starting a new course, art history, Renaissance to modern. I thought you might be interested. You've always loved art, haven't you? Indeed, Elaine and I often visited museums and galleries. It was a shared hobby that somehow got forgotten after she died." "Sounds interesting," I admitted. "But I'm not sure, Hutch. At my age, starting to learn—" "Come on," he interrupted me. 68 is not an age. There are older students in my law classes. Besides, you're not going to get a degree. It's just for fun, to broaden your horizons." I thought about it. Why not? What have I been doing the last few years? Working in the garden, watching TV, answering Mercy's calls, asking for money. Maybe it was time to start living for myself? "When do classes start?" I asked. "Next Tuesday, 6 p.m. I can sign you up if you want." "Okay," I decided. "Sign me up." "Great." Hutch was obviously excited. "I'm sure you'll love it. Professor Reynolds is brilliant. And, by the way, a very attractive widow about your age." "Hutch," I began with a warning in my voice. "What?" he asked innocently. "I'm just stating a fact. No innuendo." We both knew it wasn't true, but I decided not to argue. "Thanks for the information," I said dryly. "I'll keep it in mind." After talking to Hutch, I felt a strange excitement, an almost forgotten sense of anticipation for something new. Perhaps this course would indeed open a new chapter of life for me. In the evening, I pulled out old albums from the attic with photos of Elaine and me traveling. We had visited many museums and galleries around the world: the Louvre in Paris, the Prado in Madrid, the Uffizi in Florence. Looking at these photos, I remembered how we spent hours wandering the halls discussing paintings, sculptures, architecture. Elaine was always more educated about art, often explaining to me the context and meaning of certain works. I missed those conversations, her enthusiasm and knowledge. Maybe this course would help me feel connected to her again, to what we loved together. On Tuesday, an hour before class started, I stood in front of the mirror, critically evaluating my appearance. Tweed jacket, white shirt, navy blue pants, formal enough, but not overdone. I was as nervous as a schoolboy before the first day at a new school. Ridiculous if you think about it. At my age, with my life experience, afraid to go to an adult education class. After parking outside the college, I sat in the car for a while, gathering my wits. Through the window, I could see people of all ages entering the building: young students with backpacks, adults obviously after work, a few older people. I wasn't the only age student, and that was a little comforting. Hutch met me in the lobby with his usual energy and enthusiasm. "Truman, glad you could make it. Come on, I'll walk you to the auditorium and introduce you to Professor Reynolds." He led me through the corridors of the college, telling me about the history of the building, the courses taught here, the people who work here. I listened, half listening, still fighting nervousness. The auditorium turned out to be a small, cozy room with a projector and screen. The walls were decorated with reproductions of famous paintings. There was a woman standing at a table by the blackboard, spreading out some papers. She looked up as we entered and smiled. Professor Lydia Reynolds was exactly as Hatch had described, an elegant woman my age with short gray hair and lively brown eyes. She radiated intelligence and confidence. "Lydia," Hatch addressed her, "let me introduce you to my friend Truman Baxter. He will be attending your course." "A pleasure, Mr. Baxter." She shook my hand. Her handshake was firm and warm. "I hope you enjoy our journey through art history." "Just Truman, please," I replied. "And I'm sure the course will be fascinating. My late wife and I were always interested in art." "Oh, I'm sorry." Her smile turned sympathetic. "I'm a widow, too. It's not an easy path." We exchanged understanding glances, the kind of tacit recognition of shared experience that is only possible between people who have suffered such a loss. Hutch coughed. "Well, I'll leave you to it. Truman, call me tomorrow to tell me how the first class went." When he left, Professor Reynolds, Lydia, showed me where to sit and briefly explained the structure of the course. Gradually, the auditorium filled with other students. To my surprise, the group was quite diverse. A few young people, clearly regular college students, a few middle-aged people, and 3 or 4 around my age. I felt more comfortable. The class began with an overview of Renaissance art. Lydia was a terrific teacher, enthusiastic, knowledgeable, and with a great sense of humor. She didn't just talk about the paintings and sculptures. She told stories about the artists, the times in which they lived, and the political and social context of their work. The 2 hours flew by. After the class, when most of the students had already dispersed, I went over to thank her. It was really fascinating, I said sincerely. You made Botticelli and Michelangelo come alive. Thank you, she smiled. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Hutch told me a little about you. Said you needed a new hobby. Yeah, you could say that. I looked a little confused, wondering how much Hutch had told her about my situation with Mercy. The last few years had been difficult. I understand, she nodded. After my husband died, I had to relearn how to live too. Art has helped me a lot. We got to talking. It turned out that her husband had died 5 years ago of a heart attack. Like Elaine and me, they didn't have children. It didn't work out, as she simply put it. After his death, she immersed herself completely in her work, in art, in teaching. Art reminds us that beauty and meaning exist even in the darkest of times, she said as she gathered her materials. At least I like to think so. We walked out of the college together. In the parking lot, I worked up the courage to ask, Lydia, would you like to have coffee sometime? We could continue our conversation about art. She looked at me with mild surprise, then smiled. I'd love to, Truman. Maybe this Saturday? We exchanged phone numbers and I drove home feeling like the world around me was brighter and more interesting. For the first time in a long time, I looked forward to the next day. The art history course was the first of many changes in my life. Every Tuesday I attended class, gradually getting to know other students, participating in discussions and discovering new aspects of art that I hadn't thought about before. On Saturdays, Lydia and I would meet in cafes or in the park, discussing not only art but also books, music, traveling, and our lives before and after the loss of our spouses. Our friendship developed gradually, without haste or pressure. We both understood the value of this new bond and didn't want to rush it or complicate it. A month into the course, I received my first word from Mercy, a short message. Dad, we need to talk. It's important. I didn't respond. Knew that important probably meant they needed money again. The decision to end financial support remained firm. The next day, she called. I didn't pick up. Another day later, she and Langston showed up at my house. I saw their car through the window, but I didn't open the door. They called and knocked, but eventually drove away. I felt a prick of guilt, but I knew I was doing the right thing. If they really wanted to repair the relationship, they would respect my boundaries and my decision. Instead, I focused on new aspects of my life. In addition to taking an art history course, I joined a local chess club that met on Thursdays at the library. There, I met several interesting people, including Norman, a former math professor, and Howard, a retired military man who became my regular playing partners. Hutch was delighted with my change. You're a different person, Truman, he said during one of our lunches. More energetic, more open. And I must say, Lydia seems to be a very positive influence on you. I smiled, but didn't comment on that last remark. My friendship with Lydia was something special, something I wanted to keep in peace and quiet without outside interference or expectations. In early December, after completing an art history course, Lydia suggested I join a small group that was planning a weekend trip to New York City to visit the Impressionist exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's only 4 days, she said. Museums, nice restaurants, maybe even a show on Broadway. What do you think? The thought of traveling, the first time in years, was both daunting and exciting. We used to always travel with Elaine. After she died, I never even considered traveling anywhere. I'm not sure, Lydia, I began. Think about it, she interrupted me gently. You don't have to decide now. But Truman, life goes on, and it can be beautiful if you let it be. I promised to think about it, and I did think about it all evening. Before I went to bed, I looked at Elaine's picture and mentally asked her advice. What would she say? Would she condemn me for starting a new life, or would she be supportive? Live, Truman. I felt as if I could hear her voice. I always wanted you to be happy. The next day, I called Lydia and told her I was going. The trip to New York was my first real adventure in years. Our little group, Lydia, me, another couple of college professors, and 3 older students, spent 4 unforgettable days exploring museums, walking through Central Park, enjoying theater productions, and dining in cozy restaurants. We stayed in a small but elegant hotel on the Upper East Side close to the museums. I had my own room, but we spent most of our time together discussing what we had seen, sharing our impressions. On the evening of the last day, after dinner, Lydia and I decided to take a walk along the waterfront. It was a cold, clear evening, the lights of the city reflected in the dark waters of the river. We walked slowly, talking about the exhibition, about the paintings that had impressed us most. "You know, Truman," Lydia said, stopping and looking at the horizon, "I'm glad Hutch brought you to my course. These last few months have been special." "For me, too," I replied. "You've helped me see that life isn't over, that there are still places to explore, art to understand, people for friendship." She turned to me, her eyes glittering in the light of the street lamps. "Just for friendship?" My heart beat faster. I took her hand gently. "Maybe for something more. If you're ready?" "I am." She squeezed my hand. "Are you?" Instead of answering, I leaned in and kissed her softly. It was a simple, tender kiss, a promise, the beginning of something new. When we returned to Spring Creek, I felt like a different person, more alive, more open to the possibilities that life offered. My relationship with Lydia developed slowly, respectful of the memory of our deceased spouses, but with the joy of discovering each other. I still hadn't heard from Mercy. After a failed attempt to see me in November, she seemed to have given up. Sometimes I caught myself thinking about her, wondering how she was, what was going on in her life. But then I remembered the years of manipulation and lies, and the resolve remained firm. If she ever came to me sincerely, without financial motives, I would be willing to listen. But until then, our paths diverged. In the spring, Lydia suggested another trip, this time to Europe, to Italy, to see Renaissance art in its native environment. A 2-week tour including Florence, Venice, and Rome. "It's expensive, Truman," she warned, "but I think it's worth it. To see Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, Michelangelo's frescoes in the Sistine Chapel." I smiled. You know what the irony is? For years I'd been saving money, denying myself a lot of things so Mercy and Langston could live large. And now I can spend that money on something that will really enrich my life. We went to Italy in April when the blooming gardens and soft sunshine provided the perfect backdrop for seeing Renaissance masterpieces. Standing in front of the original paintings we were studying in the course, I felt almost physically overwhelmed by their beauty and power. Lydia, with her knowledge and passion for art, was the perfect companion. In the evenings, we sat in small trattorias, drinking local wine, watching people passing by, talking about everything in the world. I told her more about my relationship with Mercy, the years of manipulation, the final breakup. She told me about her complicated relationship with her brother, who, like my daughter, saw her only as a source of money. "Sometimes the most painful decisions are the right ones," she said one evening in Venice, as we sat on the terrace of our hotel, looking out over the Grand Canal. "Especially when it comes to toxic relationships." I nodded, looking at the lights of the city reflected in the dark water. I always thought being a good father meant giving, sacrificing, supporting. But it turns out, sometimes you have to be able to say no. You have to know how to set boundaries. And know how to value yourself, she added, taking my hand. "You deserve respect, Truman. You deserve a relationship based on sincerity and reciprocity, not manipulation." In that moment, sitting next to this amazing woman in one of the most beautiful cities in the world, I realized she was right. I did deserve better. And in letting go of my toxic relationship with my daughter, I discovered a new world, a world of art, travel, sincere friendship, and perhaps a new love. We returned from Italy in May, full of impressions and plans for the future. Lydia often stayed with me, and I sometimes slept in her apartment. We were in no hurry to formalize our relationship. We both understood the value of independence, especially at our age after many years of marriage. In June, almost 8 months after our breakup, I received a letter from Mercy. Not an email, but a real paper letter, delivered by the post office. I held it in my hands for a long time before deciding to open it. The letter was short. Mercy wrote that she and Langston were getting a divorce, that she'd been rethinking a lot of things over the past few months, that she'd like to meet, to talk, if I'm ready. I showed the letter to Lydia, asking her advice. "You have to follow your heart, Truman," she said. "But be careful. People rarely change dramatically." I decided to meet with Mercy, but on neutral ground, a cafe downtown. I wanted to see her, to hear what she had to say, but I wasn't ready to let her back into my life without the assurance of her sincerity. Mercy came in alone. She looked different, less groomed, more tired, but in a strange way, more real. We talked for a long time. She talked about the divorce, about how Langston had left her with debt, about how she was beginning to realize what she'd been doing to our relationship all these years. "I'm not asking you to forgive me, Daddy," she said at the end. "And I'm not asking for money. I just wanted you to know that I understand. And I'm sorry." I didn't believe her right away. But when the meeting ended without a single request for financial help, without manipulation, I felt faint hope. Maybe she really had changed. Maybe, in time, we could rebuild some kind of relationship, not the same as before, but healthier, more sincere. But that was a matter for the future, and the present was filled with new friends, new interests, traveling, and of course, Lydia. The life I had created for myself when I decided to no longer be an ATM for my family. One evening, sitting on the veranda with Lydia, Hutch, and a few other friends, I realized I was happy, truly happy for the first time in years. I was free from the burden of manipulation and had found genuine connections with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. "What are you thinking about?" Lydia asked, noticing my absent look. "Freedom," I answered, smiling at her.